Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you very much. Okay, let's start then. So, good evening to everybody. And this is the bit about the fire alarms now, which I'll read to you all now. There's no fire alarm planned for this evening. Should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass doors behind you over there. And through the double doors onto the riverside, which is the one straight under the clock there. Please meet outside Cafe des Amis, obviously over in the other corner of the road. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. This meeting is being minuted, recorded and audio live streamed via the council's website. And the Westgate Gardens member on the riverside are locked at sunset, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall via the side exit and behind the glass door. So it's that one over there to be the way that you leave tonight. Okay, so welcome to meeting the Cabinet. The Cabinet is part of the council's responsible for the day-to-day decisions. It is made up of the leader, who is elected by the council, and that's myself, Alan Baldock. The other Cabinet members are Councillor Dixie, who's not here tonight, is Deputy Leader, and the Cabinet Member for Property, Performance and Oversight. Councillor Soul, Cabinet Member for Finance. Councillor Hazelton, who's the Cabinet Member for Housing. Councillor Dawkins is the Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Biodiversity. Councillor Charlotte Cornell is the Cabinet Member for Heritage, Open Space, Waste and Recycling. Councillor Chris Cornell is the Cabinet Member for Coastal Towns. Councillor Ricketts, the Cabinet Member for Tourism, Movement and Rural Development. And Councillor Noland is Community, Culture, Safety and Engagement. Cabinet collectively provides strategic leadership to the Council. Okay, so Lauren, any apologies?
Just apologies from Councillor Dixie.
Sorry. Should we do that?
Just apologies from Councillor Dixie, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, those of you who are observant will notice there's a whole mystery going to unfold between, on the screens with who's talking and not. Don't believe a word of it, okay? Because they're not the real people tonight, but those of you will be a quiz on it later, who's described as who, okay? So we'll see where it goes. Don't worry about it. You hear what's going on, but it won't be the right photos, which for many of us would be a relief, but unfortunately we're lumbered with being on the screen. So, any declarations of interest, Lauren, that come to you already?
No declarations received, Chair.
Okay. Is there any of the councillors on the Cabinet or officers need to declare interests? Okay.
Thank you. I just need to declare that I'm a board member at Canenco. Thank you.
That's right. You're the council's appointed board member, aren't you? That's probably just to make that absolutely clear for the record. Do any of the Cabinet members wish to make an announcement or tell us some important news?
I was just wondering quickly, in terms of we're discussing green bins, as a user of the green bin service, I should declare there's a potential pecuniary interest in what we're discussing tonight.
I think those of the we better, I never even give that a thought, to be quite honest, of being separated it away. Probably worth declaring if you are, that's me included, but whether you want to declare that as well, that's not very, Pip is probably the only one that would not relish the thought of a green bin, perhaps, yeah. So, yeah, I'm going to go around the room now. So is it just Pip that hasn't got, is that right? Okay, so there was Councillor Soul, Councillor Ricketts, myself, Alan Baldock, Councillor Nolan, Councillor Chris Cornell, Councillor Charlotte Cornell, and I've all used the green bin service. The green bin. and Councillor Dawkins as well. So that's all of us actually use that thing. So that's a welcome thought. Thank you for that, Alex, for pointing that out. Is there anything other points that I've thought about? No. No. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that. Let's just take a moment to reflect. I don't think we've missed anything else off that agenda, have we? No, that's good. Okay. Is there any other announcements councillors want to make? So, okay, that's Councillor Hazelton and Councillor Nolan. So, Councillor Hazelton first, please.
Thank you. I just want to give you a brief report from the housing portfolio. The Older Persons Accommodation Working Group restarts this week and expects to conclude early in the new year, when recommendations will be forthcoming. Some challenging but necessary decisions are likely to have to be made at that point. This will be reported back and decisions made through the usual democratic process. Work is ongoing to speed up the condition surveys of our housing stock, reduce spend on temporary accommodation, driving down the number of days that properties stay empty, getting homes reoccupied sooner, housing more families and individuals, increasing revenue at the same time. And in response to councillor requests, officers are preparing a briefing with greater detail about the operation of our housing needs register, so that all councillors are better informed when giving advice and guidance to residents' questions. This is intended to improve our communication and service delivery, which was part of the manifesto we put to the electorate in May this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Pip. Appreciate that. Connie?
Yeah, part of my portfolio is enforcement, and I just want to re-emphasise that it's very important that the residents feel safe in the district, and I have had exploratory meetings with various residents and also community groups about strengthening the council's role in bringing community groups together and also to improve the safety in the district.
Thanks for that. I've got Mel.
Okay. Just thank you. Just want to remind you about my situation with my hearing impairment, because it's quite, I have to change the loop system, so it takes a minute, but if I don't use it, I won't be able to hear any of the speakers this evening, which would be tragic. Okay, I just wanted to make some, obviously my portfolio is climate change and biodiversity. So the Open Spaces and Biodiversity Working Group met for the first time this month, and it was a very good meeting, and we've got lots of, on that working group, there's some external people who sit on it who are very passionate and experts in that about nature and biodiversity. So I'm really excited about that, and I thought that would be good time to say that that's happened. I went down to Simon Langton School for Girls and met with the science teachers there to look at their biodiverse site there, and hope that we can use that in some of our actions with the working group. Also, I've been pushing for the plastic-free single-use plastic policy that the council has done, and Miss Wakeman over there actually wrote a report a number of years ago. I think it might have just gotten, with COVID and all that, it might have just gone a bit on the wayside. So it's back on the agenda, it's back on with the management, and it's going to be, everybody's going to be reminded of it, that we have our plastic-free single-use plastic policy within the council. So if we can push that. And I've also asked Leo Whitlock if we could have a briefing on air quality policy and strategy, because I get quite a lot of emails, and it'd be really useful for all the councillors to have a briefing on it. So hopefully that will go ahead. Thank you.
Councillor Chris Cornell.
Over the last month, I had the joy of going to the Local Government Association Coastal Conference in sunny Skegness, although it wasn't that sunny when I went. But it was a good opportunity to meet between 25 and 30 other local authorities to talk about the coastal issues. And there were a number of kind of common concerns. The first of which is that they're going to look at doing some work on water quality testing. You'll know we have a citizen science project in Canterbury, which over the summer has had some relatively high results, but the information is available on the SOS Whitstable website. Any figure over 50, I just want to assure people we report to the Environment Agency and essentially to Southern Water. And given a high number of them over the summer, we've done some additional testing as to the accuracy of the system that we are using, both with the Environment Agency and receiving some extra testing. We're also going the extra mile and seeking to double test the results that we get in to send them to a lab in London, so we can be confident that the information we're presenting to the local public is consistent. We had a number of good conversations about litter plans. I'm a sad man who takes photos of different councillors' littering policies whenever I'm on a different beach. And some conversations post-summer and looking at coastal littering are taking place with officers this week. There was also some conversations about how various different authorities deal with harbours and kind of fares and dues. The Whitstable Harbour Plan is proceeding, went out to members of the board for comment last week, and will go to stakeholder consultation on the 13th of October, setting forward, hopefully, our strategy for the next 10 years. Members of the public will be invited to be involved in that, probably from the last week of November onwards.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Charlotte Cornell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Continuing with many meetings to make sure we continue on the successful and timely delivery of the LUF. That progresses well, and thank you to everyone who has submitted responses to our various consultations so far, some of which are ongoing. With the Canterbury Tales of England, we continue to look at future projects for the city and work up how those could be financed and forwarded in the years to come. Congratulations are due to the Open Spaces team for the very successful Riverfest, which finished last week. That was a great success, and we're already, I know, looking to next year. And it was fantastic to see so many different groups from across the city engage in what was a really varied digital and in-person youth and wider community, environmental and historical platform. It was a real success to see such a varied programme that I know so many people engaged with, and I'm looking forward to that developing even further next year so we can celebrate our Stour, which I know we'll talk about later tonight as well. We've also been looking with the Open Spaces team again at enhancing some sports opportunities across the district, hopefully of which I'll have more to say in future meetings. Also various meetings with stakeholders, such as the Westgate Hall Trust, who across the city and across the district have a long-term interest in the survival of our heritage assets. And then there's some waste and recycling matters, much of which we are about to discuss tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Charlotte. Alex, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, pleased to report that in the last month we've had the first meeting of this council with the Parish Engagement Group, which was set up under the Parish Charter. That's supposed to meet a minimum of twice a year. I suspect that will meet more than twice over the next year, given the local plan and various other things, but it was well attended, great engagement, and hopefully we'll be having a few more of those in the diary soon to talk about some issues, but everyone seemed very happy with the agenda, and it was a great success. I've continued to meet with a number of stakeholders with a variety of different hats on, and quite often tourism and transport. Those both hats are worn in every meeting. Had a really good meeting with the local bus partnership group, which includes Kent County Council and Stagecoach and Canterbury City Council. Some really good positive noises about what we're hoping to bring forward with the transport policy that we're looking to bring in as part of the local plan. And we are preparing for the off-street parking places order, which will come through later this year, but I don't want to ruin the surprise for that one. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Mike. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, work has begun on the 24-25 budget, and it's very early to say yet what that might include, but I'm very keen to make sure that we do move forward with many of the manifesto pledges that we jointly put forward together. Things are tough, it's going to be difficult, but I'm determined that we deliver a balanced budget that delivers a better district moving forward.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I'll go along with that. Two very quick things, actually. Had a great opening of the Canterbury Riverside on the weekend, just gone. And it's been a tough call for everyone involved. It's actually been going on since 2004. I found the old document at home when I was moving between houses. I shall cherish it. And sorry. But it was great to see. There's a little bit more still to do. A few more units to occupy, but it was very good. And again, I'm with Mike on the fact that we're delivering, working through the budget now, which is going to be a tough call for our cabinet, but we're keeping involved on that. So I'll shut up and we'll move on with the meeting. Thank you very much. Yeah, we've got 3 people can speak today, which is great. Councillor Claire Turnbull, Paul Whitfield of the Wildwood Trust, and Richard Norman. Norman, they will come before the item. Looking forward to their participation. We've got some minutes to agree, and they were the meeting on the 10th of July. And you might recall we also had a meeting on the 1st of August, which was the special meeting to do with the Park and Ride. So is there any comments on those? If not, can we agree those as a true record? Thank you for that. Okay. So we've also got some references from the committee. We need to note the minutes of the overview and scrutiny meeting on the 14th of September 2023, and they're in the supplement. And these will be obviously referred to later in the agenda, which is what we're here to work through together. But I'd obviously ask that you would accept those in general assent that they are correct. Thank you for that. Now we're into the first part of the meeting, part A, our items to be considered with public participation. And the first one we're going to be looking at is the notice of motion on the biodiversity. This is pages 20 to 35 in our agendas. So if you want to find those, then we'll move forwards. Okay, there's agenda item 7, so, right. Okay, so this is notice of motion for biodiversity. Many people here from the public is here, and officers were here for that first part when we take that motion at full council, you might recall. And we're going to consider a report from Susie Wakeham, Director of People and Place, and Richard Moore, Head of Transport and Environment. And the senior officer for this particular one is Martin Hall. So you take the speakers now? Yeah. Okay. So I believe Claire is going to be speaking first, and then is it Paul and then Richard. So thank you, Claire.
Thank you. I'm here as Vice Chair of the Open Spaces and Biodiversity Working Group to support the acceptance of the recommendations of the report. We've all heard the terrible consequences that human actions are having on the delicate balance of our ecosystems. It's very important that the Council does its bit towards addressing this by giving a clear statement of commitment to maximising the protection and promotion of biodiversity in the Canterbury District. Thank you to the Environment team for the report, which gives a clear and comprehensive review of the implications of the declaration and of the drivers and mechanisms for enacting it. I'm very pleased to see the proposal that the working group will be supporting the Council in developing and delivering the pro-diversity agenda across the Council's work. The OS and BG working group has met only once, but it's already clear that having passionate and well-informed local stakeholders as members will help ensure that it is robust in keeping the Council on track with its commitments on biodiversity. Clearly, there is a lot for the Council to review in the light of this declaration, and it is crucial that the declaration carries real weight. For instance, that all development decisions have preserving and increasing biodiversity at their heart, that it is a driver, not an add-on, and that measures are meaningful and their implementation is monitored. It is good to see that many of the areas for action can be addressed in the short term, and it'll be great to hear from officers on the timescales for these. I'm sure that group members will be keen to support officers in any way they can in gathering evidence and information, providing advice and clarifying priorities. In the short term, local people will judge the Council's commitment to biodiversity by what they see happening in their local area. As word of the biodiversity crisis has spread, many councillors have been contacted by residents concerned about heavy-handed grounds maintenance, for instance, and it is important that people can see that the Council is taking care to protect wildlife habitats, manage open spaces sensitively, and identify opportunities for pro-diversity planting and wildlife corridors, particularly in our urban areas. Some of these can be quick wins for both nature and the Council, and the sooner initiatives in these areas can be launched, the better. Local people are also keen to know what they can do to promote biodiversity in their own space or local area, and Council initiatives to provide or coordinate ideas, information and advice will be extremely helpful. I look forward to working with councillors, officers and local people to make sure that the declaration of a biodiversity emergency has real meaning in the Canterbury district. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Turnbull. Much appreciated. Okay. Paul, would you like to come forward? Please introduce yourself, Paul, and make your comments.
Press the button. I'm Paul Whitfield, Director General of the Wildwood Trust. I've got 3 minutes to summarise the biodiversity crisis for you. Biodiversity is the most precious and important thing that we have. Biodiversity is the natural world around us. It's all the different kinds of organisms, the plants, the animals, the insects, and the microorganisms. And each of those live and work together in ecosystems, maintain and support all life on Earth. They exist in a very delicate balance. Without biodiversity, the entire support system for human animal life will collapse. We rely on nature to provide us with food, with clean water. It's the source of a lot of our medicines. It prevents flooding and extreme climate effects. It's truly vital to life on Earth. And biodiversity, as I said, is crucial to our future survival, and its loss is a huge crisis that we have to face. We all need to take climate change very seriously, but if we fix the climate crisis and ignore the biodiversity crisis, we're going to have mass extinctions anyway, not just of plants and animals, but of humans too. It is a global issue and a national issue and also a local issue, and so we need global, national and local solutions to the problem. Just last week, we had the latest State of Nature report. And looking specifically at England, it paints a really bleak picture. It makes it clear that things aren't getting better, they're actually getting worse, despite all the work that's happening. And it confirms that the UK is now one of the most nature-depleted countries on Earth. It is by far the worst country for biodiversity in the entire G7. 16% of our species in the UK are classified of risk of extinction in Great Britain. There's been a 32% decline in species abundance since 1970. Over half of our plant species have seen a decrease in their distribution. The red squirrel is endangered in the UK, its population having declined by 37%. Skylarks have declined by 56%, and without serious action, we will lose our turtle doves by the end of this decade. Our hedgehogs are at risk. I could go on all night. It paints, like I say, a very bleak picture. But it's also an urban issue. You know, biodiversity and tree cover, clean air and clean water, they're all at risk. And there's an exclusion from nature, from citizens in our urban areas too. And so without doubt, this is a deeply important emergency. We need to acknowledge that fact, and we need to act now to start to reverse the damage that we've done to nature before it's simply too late. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rick Norman, would you like to follow? Thank you.
As one of the initiators of the petition that came to Council, I want to thank councillors, all councillors, yourselves included, for the unanimous support they gave to it. And I want to thank officers for the very impressive report that we have this evening. You've heard from Paul and from Claire. It is an emergency and it requires urgent action. And as you see from the report, the Council is already taking action. Things like the open spaces strategy and the tree strategy, the riverside strategy, important elements in the local plan. What we hope is that a declaration of biodiversity emergency will bring together these different commitments into an overall whole that's more than the sum of its parts, an overall vision which we hope we can all get behind, Council and community. I want to just briefly make three more specific comments, if I may. In the report, there's a number of references to partnerships. Most of the references, I think, are references to working with corporate bodies. And it would be good to see a bit more emphasis on working with community groups. The Environment Team already has an excellent track record on that, working with friends groups for open spaces. We've heard about the recent Riverfest from Councillor Cornell, which was a great example of council and community working together. We've heard from Councillor Dawkins about the role of community groups on the working group. And I hope that in the report that will come in April, all of that will be beefed up to give an important role to ongoing cooperation between the council and community groups. A couple more just very specific points. One further point about that is I wonder whether councils might consider slightly tweaking the resolution at the bottom of the first page where it refers to the group will support corporate efforts. Wonder whether that might be amended possibly to corporate and community efforts. That's just a suggestion anyway, which you might consider. Two very, very quick points then. There's very little reference to marine biodiversity. And that's obviously a major concern. Councillor Cornell talked about water testing, coastal waters, and obviously that's very important, but it's only very briefly referred to in box BA25. So I hope that's something that will get more attention as this process moves forward. The final point, and I hope it doesn't sound too much like just a semantic point, but if you resolve as recommended this evening, and if Council then endorses that, will that be the declaration or will it be a decision to go forward to a declaration? I hope it'll be the former. I hope that by October the 19th, we will be able to say this council has adopted a declaration of biodiversity emergency, because it is an emergency and we haven't got a lot of time, and let's get on with it. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Rick. That's appreciated. Okay. Right. Okay. I think you all know the score now. So I'm going to propose, or I'm not going to, Councillor Dawkins is going to propose, and if it's okay with Mel, I'll get her to read out the proposal, and we look for a seconder for that from the rest of the cabinet, and then should we decide to amend any of those things, we would do it in the usual way, and vote on that amendment, and then come back and we'll vote on the substantive. So, Mel, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. If you don't mind, I might just introduce the report a little bit first.
Yeah, providing you can introduce the report, of course you can,
Yeah.
but providing you do that formal bit at the
Or
end.
do you want me to do the formal bit first?
It would be
or at
better
the
if you
end?
did, then we can talk to
Okay.
the motion, okay?
Sorry?
It would be better if you did.
Okay. Okay, so the proposal this evening is that the Cabinet supports the motion to declare a biodiversity emergency to demonstrate Cabinet's commitment to tackling the biodiversity emergency by championing short and long-term actions across the Council that together contribute to delivering nature's recovery. Key Council documents, such as the local plan and corporate plan, will reflect the biodiversity emergency and will address ways in which the Council, through its activities and decision-making, can improve the health of biodiversity across the Canterbury District. 2, that the Canterbury District Open Space and Biodiversity Group will support corporate efforts to develop and deliver appropriate and budgeted measures to ensure Agenda Item 7, page 20, biodiversity interests are considered and addressed. The Open Space and Biodiversity Group will produce a draft biodiversity plan for the Cabinet District, in brackets a nature recovery plan, by April 2024. Okay.
Thank you. Would somebody like to second that? Thank you, Councillor Nolan. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Mel, and introduce the report.
Yeah, no, I just thank you very much. Yeah, well, I want to thank the officers for putting the report together, especially Martin Hall, who's sitting over there, who I might ask to come in a minute if I feel like I haven't said it all. But it's a very good report, and I welcome the report. I'm very pleased that we're sitting here today, and I thank all the speakers for speaking so passionately about this subject, which is it's basically the one subject that is the most important one we face, really. But we don't think about it every day. So the report is following the petition and the motion, as we talked about, and was unanimously voted through by the Cabinet to ask. It was unanimously voted through by the Council to ask the Cabinet to consider the implications of this declaration. So the report kind of looks at those implications. We're in good stead, as the Environment Act 2021 already requires in law that all local authorities have a duty to conserve and enhance nature and biodiversity. It's also a good time to declare, because of the development of the draft local plan Reg 18 work that's going ahead, and the evidence that's being developed to support those robust policies that some of the speakers mentioned, such as the pollinator action plan and the tree strategy and the river strategy and all these other strategies. We have the corporate plan coming up for decision very soon, and that would be the place to put this declaration in, so it's right in the middle of our council, and that we could be called perhaps an eco-council, who knows. It's very important as well, as one of the speakers mentioned, to make sure that we see climate change and biodiversity as two things, but at the same time, they're not two things. They definitely have different needs that need addressing and different ways of dealing with those issues, but at the same time, they're very interlinked. So they need to be treated separately, but seen as a whole. Let's just have a look at this. Small one. Okay, so in the report, it goes into a bit more detail about what the council is actually doing, and there are a lot of fantastic things that the council and the environment team are actually doing, and what our district already holds. And there are a lot of open spaces available to us. I added up the two percentages, and we have 25% of designations to wildlife with SSIs and local nature reserves. We have many strategies in place, and some of those partnerships that we talked about, such as the Wild Ableen and Woodland Trust. So, as I said already, it's our duty to conserve and enhance biodiversity already. And within the report, there is a long list of possible areas to explore that we could be implementing as part of our declaration. So there's 25 there that we need to discuss tonight. It might be that we want to tweak them, that we want to add some more, take some away. I'll just mention a couple, but hopefully you've all read the report. I have to say that, I always like to say that. So obviously BA1 is acknowledgement of the Declaration of Biodiversity Emergency in the new corporate plan to promote the value and importance placed on our local biodiversity for its intrinsic value as well as public benefits. So getting in that corporate plan is great, as well as climate emergency, I would say. That we need to complete all those strategies. We've got the Open Space and Biodiversity Group invited to contribute in assisting in responding to the biodiversity emergency. BA6, subject to growth bid, tree and woodland officer to promote new tree planting. BA9, the community was mentioned a little bit, so establishment and management of new community gardens and biodiversity initiatives. Continuing to work with partnerships such as the Wild Bleen to get that connectivity. Develop a BA18, develop a biodiversity plan for Canterbury District. So that would be something that the group would be doing. So like those are some of the things anyway that are in the list, and hopefully we can have a good discussion now and perhaps bring in some of what the speakers have said and support this motion tonight. Thank you. If the senior officer Martin Hall would like a welcome if he wants to add anything. If he doesn't want to, that's fine.
That'd be fine. Thank you, Mel. And of
But
course,
he's there for questions if anyone's got any questions.
If Martin would like to add
Technical
to
questions.
any points there, that'd be welcome. The comments. Thank you.
I'm happy, Chair. I'm happy to help answer questions. I think Councillor Dawkins has done a great job in introducing the paper. Thank you.
That's perfect. Thank you very much, and good that you're here to take those questions. I'm sure there'll be absolutely loads. So this proposal has been this has been proposed and seconded, introduced by Councillor Dawkins. Please, let's start the debate. I've got Alex to start the debate. Thank you.
Just very quickly on that point, I think Rick mentioned the word corporate within there. As I read that, I understood that to mean corporate as in the council rather than corporate as in external corporations. Just for a point of clarity, that's what I understood it to be. Is that what it is?
Do you
So
think-
in the wording of the motion, it says to support the corporate activity. That's corporate in terms of the city council's corporate plan and the body corporate, as opposed to corporations as in private industry. So in terms of what Rick was asking for, could we insert community? I think it's not that confusion, but.
Yeah. Are you proposing that we tweak that?
No, I'm saying I don't think it needs to be tweaked, because I think the word corporate in this sense is referring to supporting the internal council work rather than, I think Rick read it to mean external corporations, whereas it's actually
That's
just
fine.
a bit of vague, actually very specific council wording that probably isn't very well understood outside of us who read a lot of these papers.
Let's come back to that in a minute, and that's really good. Thank you for that. Good. Chris, and then Charlotte. Thank you.
Just picking up on a couple of things. Obviously, it's really nice to see such a breadth of different activities. I know the Biodiversity Group did some great work last year coming up with its top 10, but to be able to kind of suddenly identify another kind of 20 to 30 actions which we can take forward are really encouraging. Just a couple of things picking up, and I don't think there need to be formal amendments, perhaps just reflections back to the group, so to speak. The first of which is, I know that Martin, you've had some good conversations already with Foreshore Services about the declaration we made at the last council meeting around the marine ecology plan. It strikes me essentially that whilst I know that needs to come back in front of council in the next year, if there was an opportunity for a stream of marine ecology in the biodiversity plan, that might be a natural home for it going forward. Secondly, just kind of picking up on BA23, where it talks about kind of review and management of our own land. The thing which kind of strikes me as also missing here is the point that Claire was making around management of open space. It's often existing land which we already have a management plan on, sometimes of which may be a little bit old and in need of review. So the Tankerton Slopes Open Spaces Plan, I remember being talked about up for review when there were local forums some 18 months, 2 years ago. So perhaps there's a job about having some greater transparency about where we do have management plans in place for Fields in Trust or SSSIs, that those are either available on the council website where possible, and all the dates for review and where they will be reviewed are clear. Because I think that's the other thing, because a lot of some of the stuff with Fields in Trust, for example, are historically designed with a group which we might have an ongoing relationship with, but this is an opportunity to encourage them to look at how we're reviewing the land. So if BA23 could also, had some greater transparency about management practices which we already have in place or structures for that. And a push that perhaps if we're going to have marine ecology, that could also have some of the information we put in as part of the blue flag beach designations, because whilst often we think that that relates to seawater quality, it often also relates to environmental education in local schools. Some other criteria relates to management of the marine environment as well. And we're already collecting that information and presenting it. Thank you.
Charlotte. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I echo my colleagues' words that this is an excellent report and it's great to see so many detailed targets and objectives. I wonder if there might be the capacity for some further focus on enhancing and extending community activity and education offer, our outreach offer, and just whether that might be reflected as a BA26 to seek and enhance our public-facing community activity and education offer in relation to as many of the previous points as possible. I'm just picking up again on the success that was Riverfest, and education, I think, is a little bit lacking in some of the points up to now. Equally, reflecting on BA21, I wonder if we might commit within that to a publication of our annual tree audit, or a very easy way in which our annual tree audit could be seen and appraised by the public, so we've got that full transparency on why we make the decisions on trees that we do going forward. Yeah.
That's excellent. Martin, could you come back on one or two of those and just put some technical stuff in, the yeses, the nos, or we need to do it, have we thought about this, options, those sort of things, and then we get some of those onto paper perhaps.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor Ricketts was correct on his interpretation around corporate, so thank you for that. I had to double check myself, but that was what I was meaning. But Richard Norman is true about furthering evidence about engagement with community groups. We do that very well, I think, already, hopefully. If not, talk to me a bit later after this meeting. So within the wider biodiversity actions, I'll see if there's something we can do, but I think in the recommendations, I say Councillor Ricketts is correct, and I don't think it would sit comfortably there. Regarding foreshore biodiversity, and again, Richard, your comment actually about marine elements, it is lacking, I agree. I probably stayed within my comfort zone, if I'm completely honest, but I used to do integrated coastal zone management, so I'll go back to that job and bring some of that thought into the plan, according to Councillor Chris Cornell's comments as well. I think it is a really good point, Councillor Cornell, about the review of existing strategies. We've undertaken a review of the Riverside strategy, and not to our surprise, but to our delight, we found a lot of the actions actually had been completed. So there's something very positive that we could promote there. And my colleagues are starting work, well, they started work, but I paused them to do something else on Tankton Slopes review. So we're currently looking at that and all the appendices to make sure we got the appropriate information in the right place and updating. And we'll be making sure that contracts and Konenko are very much involved in that process, as well as local councillors. And we'll be doing that for a number of other documents as well. An interesting comment about blue flag. We currently work very much around the green flag, and I'm sure a lot of what you said we can supply to foreshore team to help support the blue flag applications. The one where I've got, I'm going to be honest, a very slight challenge as to whether we're best placed to do this is Councillor Charlotte Cornell's comments about education. I agree education doesn't come forward very strongly around external. Yes, we had a very good Riverfest. I personally think there's probably other organisations better placed to do it, if I'm honest with you. And I think we've got such scant resources, I'll prioritise them elsewhere. And when I've worked out on education, if you do it half decently, you're swamped and you cannot move for going and visiting schools and providing updated packs and things like that. So I think what we might do first is an audit of what environmental education offers are out there, like forest schools, and how we can work with others and see if that's an easier and more deliverable way of achieving what you correctly see as lacking at the moment. And tree audits is definitely something we can be looking into, and if we are lucky enough to secure any resource around that area, that would definitely be part of that work as it is currently in the job description. And if that's not the case, I'm still sure there's ways that we can improve the sharing of the information via various audits to demonstrate, again, what are we doing around TPOs, what are we doing around trees which have had to be felled for various reasons, and what are we doing to respond to that. So, Chair, I think at the moment I'm sitting here quite happy. I know it's not that important, but just so you know.
That's absolutely fine. I mean, this is, I'll be brutally honest, I kind of see this, much as people would love to have it all delivered in the first 3 months, but I think we ought to be sitting here today with a very clear idea that we stage this, we progress this logically, sensibly, in the way that we can afford to do as well as do properly, because there's no point in promising the earth and delivering nothing. I'd sooner deliver what we can properly and well and make good progress. So, you know, this is not a window dressing exercise. This is something we need to get right. And if we don't do it all in one go, we do a little bit by little bit. So now I've got Connie, and also got Pip and then Mike. So if we can go in that order, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few points. I'd like to echo what Councillor Charlotte Cornell said, and I do hear what the officer says about importance of not overstretching resources. But I think there is a message that the council can put out to the schools, to college and the 3 universities, that the council is behind them, even if we're not sort of providing money, because we haven't got any, but we're sort of, you know, the goodwill is there. And I think that would actually go quite a long way. You're absolutely right. We need to make sure that we have things which are deliverable, as opposed to sort of, you know, this is what we'd like to do. I'd like to look at more closely at land belonging to the council. I declare that I have half a plot on an allotment, and I think we could actually work with existing resources that we've got to make sure that our allotments are sort of are aware of good practice. The other thing I'd like to flag up is we don't have enough allotments, and we should make land available. I'm going to put that stake in the ground now. We should make more land available for allotments, because I think it's really important. Forest schools are wonderful, and I'm very much for them. But I'm aware of sort of we mustn't overpromise. But I think there are imaginative ways of making our pound go further, as it were. I was very impressed with the council's award for, you know, the best kept plot on a council sort of estate, and we could do more of that. You know, we're just putting a few pounds in, you know, sort of for the glory of having that first sort of badge and whatever. I think there's more imaginative ways that we can work with this. And I know I'm being a pedant here, and I make no excuse for it at all. It's not all about trees. Can we please remember the hedges as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Over to you, Pip.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. So mine's just a technical question. One of the speakers, I think it might have been Rick, was asking, will October the 19th, assuming it's agreed tonight and it goes to council and is agreed, will October the 19th be the declaration? It's just a procedural thing. I'd like to have that clarified by one of the officers, please.
We'll come back on that in a minute, Pip, because I've got half an idea on that as well. So, Mike, do you want to just take a go?
Thank you, Chair. Really, tonight is the start, as I see this. This is just a process that will continue to evolve. It's not about defining today the specifics of what we're going to do. It's saying, here's some examples, and now we are effectively defining the way that this council thinks about things and acts on things as it moves forward. There's a paragraph in the report that says representatives from the RSPB, Hearts Delight, Friends of Goral Valley and the Friends of Kingsmead will join councillors on the OSBG in guiding, monitoring and championing the Council's response to the declaration of a biodiversity emergency. And I think you can probably add to that list just about every resident in this district. They're going to be the ones that look at us every time they see someone out there cutting down a tree or spraying a weed or not doing this or doing that. Everyone's going to be on our backs. And that's how it should be. So, and our residents will define how we move forward on this together with various groups in the district. With my finance hat on, there are a few items in here that do say subject to budgetary pressures and so on. And of course, we do need to bring all of this into the budget and see how it goes. But I'm certainly very determined that we do spend the money that we can on this, because it is very important to do this. And the sums involved aren't that large compared with when we looked at climate emergency. This is much more about helping our residents, helping other organisations do things by following the examples that we set. So I'm very encouraged by this, and I look forward to us championing biodiversity across the district.
Thanks, Mike. That's good. Trish Marshall's going to just give us a hint on the governance outcome, see whether we're happy with it. All right.
Thank you, Chair. As you can see, we've been putting our heads together and decided we haven't worded these resolutions very explicitly. So what's happening here is Cabinet is making resolutions, and the resolutions are as a result of having been asked by Council to consider the implications of the motion to declare a biodiversity emergency. So, as with all notices of motion, there will be a report back to the next Council, which will be reporting back on the implications, and therefore it will then be for Council to actually make the declaration. I don't think that is going to slow any of the actions down, if I can give that reassurance, because you're clearly fully supportive of this. Well, I'm sorry, I'm presuming what's going to happen in the vote. I'm sorry, completely leaping ahead now. It's based on the comments that have been made. I'm making a presumption that you're going to be fully supportive of this, and you're going to take it back to Council, and Council will officially declare, this Council is declaring a biodiversity emergency, having looked at the implications which you have assessed as Cabinet, if that's helpful. But just to reassure you, I don't think that means that anything is going to be slowed down by waiting for that official declaration on the 19th of this month.
Yeah, Mel?
Thank you, Tricia. Just on that, does that mean that someone has to actually in the meeting go, can we declare an emergency now, or will that be written down, or do we make that decision before we go? Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. I think for absolute clarity, what you might want to do this evening is to add a recommendation. You've got two resolutions here, which decisions that you will make. If you add a recommendation to Council saying, as a result of looking at the implications, you recommend to Council so that it declares a biodiversity emergency, then it's very clear to everyone it will come through from the Cabinet as a recommendation to Council, and Council will vote on that recommendation.
Could I propose that then? Yeah.
Yes, that'll be the third thing, won't it, we need to do, isn't it? Yeah, so yeah, please. And that will mean amendment to the proposal. So that would need seconding as well. Okay, so thank you, Alex. And in the next few minutes, I'm sure one of the officers will put a suitable string of words together that will make sure that goes clearly through. And also, just while I'm speaking just on that, I think it would be the wording that we declare on the website in the future would need to be, I think, happy with the group, the biodiversity working group, all the group that's pulled together under your chairmanship. But you know, yes, go on.
Yeah, could I come back and yeah, I think because just through talking to people and everything, there was quite a lot of confusion about. I mean, we can see that these are the actions, but what is it? What is the declaration? You know, so this will be great that we can do that at Council, and then of course the actions follow, and they need to be realistic and deliverable, which is, you know, why this report is really good. So I'm glad we sorted that out. One of the things that I wanted to kind of clarify today as well is what the role of the working group, the Open Spaces and Biodiversity Working Group, which Councillor Baldock is just sort of talking about. So perhaps the actual declaration could be worded by the working group as a sort of mission statement, perhaps. You know, I mean, what is this declaration going to say on the website, and who's going to come up with it? And that sort of begs the question: what is the emphasis that the working group does? Is it as an advisory? It supports it, or is it advisory? We're just supporting the actions. I just want some clarity on that, if that's okay. Even though I delivered the report, I just want us to make sure that we all know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think on page 22, just towards the bottom, you've got the amendment that's put to the motion, which I think was from Councillor Turnbull on the night, which was the council declares its recognition of a global biodiversity emergency and the local impact this could have on the communities and business we serve. That to me reads like that's what you're saying is the biodiversity emergency and the impact it would have. So that essentially is the same as what we had with climate change, where you used very similar wording to express the concerns of the council on behalf of residents and the communities. So that's probably the wording, given that's what came down in the notice of motion.
Just get the wording right and that one. So we don't want any hiccups later on, so that'll be absolutely fine. Okay, just one thing. I'll give you a moment or two to work. I was just going to whether we wanted to just change the wording while we're looking at minor changes. Whether we want to put something in like support Canterbury City Council's, combined efforts to develop and deliver appropriately rather than corporate, just so that the people from the public, if they read that statement, would be a little clearer, wouldn't it? Because I think that's what you mean, isn't it, Martin? And, that might be slightly different, clearer wording. It says the same, but we've read it. So are we happy to make that minor change? That's just number 2, second line down, yeah?
The suggested wording.
Yeah, so support Canterbury City Council's combined efforts.
So we were thinking it would be easier to just say that this council declares a biodiversity emergency.
No, the second bit.
Chair, which page are we looking at, please? Thank you.
Okay, let's tidy that up then, please, if you can. Thank you. Lauren, yep. Let's go through wording part 2 then, just while we go. So picking up on the point that was raised, it is a little confusing and obviously officers. So number 2 should read that Canterbury District Open Space and Biodiversity Group will support Canterbury City Council's combined efforts to develop and deliver appropriately, yeah, etc. Does that make sense? And then that takes the word corporate out, and those reading it in the future will be clear what we mean by that. And the final bit, I think we've got a word in now for that to do that. So
There was just a suggestion to make it straightforward. When it goes to council, it says that this council declares a biodiversity emergency. Are you happy to absorb that into your original proposal there, Councillor Dawkins? That would be a recommendation. It's a recommendation from Cabinet to council, because all these will go through it. So that will be a recommendation so that when it goes through to council, that it will follow through nicely, it'll be straightforward, and they'll just be able to approve that.
I don't want to just sort of delay this any longer, but the form of wording that's already in the paper from the amendment from the original thing is pretty much along those lines, but slightly wider, which is Council declares its recognition of the global biodiversity emergency and the local impact this could have on communities and businesses we serve. That wording, if we simply put, we recommend to council that it declares that, yeah. Cool.
So, Councillor Dawkins, are you happy to put that into accept that into your original proposal?
Yes, that's fine.
And Councillor Nolan, I think you were second. Are you happy as well? Great, thank you very much.
That's great. That's got that sort of tidied up nicely. So we can take that on board then if we're questioned on it in council as well. Okay. So yeah, is there any other points you wanted to raise? And more importantly, perhaps of the 25 things, there were some comments there were made specifically. Just summing up obviously we accept that there's more work to do. I think on the ocean part of it. Obviously we've got that other piece of work that's going through now about the motion for the ocean, as it's often been known. So we do that as well. So that picks up with that, I think, and is consistent with what we're actually doing. The bit about the education I picked up on, I think, is important as well. And really, that's all about us being very clear as a council that we will facilitate whatever we can for other bodies to actually pick up and work with their education policy. If we can help in some small way, then we will. But it doesn't necessarily make any budget impacts on it. It's just allowing access to land or whatever might be the case. So, tree audit, I believe we were happy that is an achievable outcome from there as well. And hedges per metre. And I think that's the points I picked out of the conversations that possibly need to be tweaked a little bit, but really mainly just in the emphasis of that wording. I'll go to Connie first and then you, Mel.
Thank you, Chair, for picking up on the hedges. But hedgerows are important as much as trees. I just wanted to say, let's not forget also the point about allotments.
Noted, yeah, thank you.
Could I just refer everyone, sorry, to BA18 and our resolution as well, that the group will be coming. The biodiversity group will be putting together a biodiversity plan. So all of these little tweaks can be picked up in that plan that will be presented in April, because I've got quite a few as well that I've kind of adopted through people speaking to me, but I don't think this is the right place to talk about them now because I presented the report. But there will be lots of tweaks, and people can write to me and Charlotte as well during that time whilst we're putting the plan together. I think our first meeting of the biodiversity group is on the 23rd of October or something like that. So there's a couple of weeks if you've got anything that you feel that you might want us to put in as extras. And in terms of the education, when I made the announcement earlier that I went to the Simon Langton, they've got I know that there used to be an environmental education centre in Broad Oak, which was discussed at the last biodiversity group as a nice resource for that educational element. It might be that we don't resurrect that, but I know for certain Simon Langton for Girls has that space already, and I would really like to look at ways of developing that so that it's kind of opened up for more people to go, and they're very keen to do that too. So,
yeah, that's the perfect sort of thing, isn't it? Okay, so if we're all happy with that, we do need to vote on this, and we'll get it set up and then vote in the usual way.
That's carried, Chair, with 8 votes.
And I would like to thank the members of the public that are with us tonight and the other officers that have come along to support as well. For those officers, we are grateful to your work and the support that you do, and just that straightforward talking, straightforward thinking that's got this over the line. So thank you for that. And I'm sure that's reflected in the public as well here today for the very same thing. So thank you for that, all of you. Really appreciate it. Next bit we'll be talking about is the working groups, which is on pages 26 to 44. 36 to 44, sorry. That's really good. Thank you for that. Okay, so this is the report back from working groups. So we are going to consider that piece of work, which was looked at by overview and scrutiny. So I would ask you to note that. Okay. So if it's okay with you, I will just very, very briefly go into a short introduction with this. I think, well, I know all of you have read the papers anyway, and I think I suppose the sanity check on all of it is that we, as we've been told many times, that we can do everything, but not all of it together. And that's probably another way of looking at it. So I think pretty much every working group that was suggested would have been a worthwhile piece of work. However, we've had to make some priorities initially that we're talking about tonight, and we will approve or not, as the case may be. And they are listed down sort of page 40, no, not, it's a bit further on that, it's page 41. So they're really to work through those. And any comments or points that you want to raise on those going forward, whether we agree them as they are now, which we've talked through briefly, or whether we want to make any notes, comments, or other points. I think the two that we would not argue with are, I guess, is the one on the elder person's accommodation review, which is a good piece of work that opens up a lot of opportunities for us. And obviously, as Pip said earlier, it also opens up some bigger decisions that we need to make as well. So really important we get on with that. I don't think we've got too much argument over that as far as I'm concerned. The local plan group, I didn't mention that in my introduction, but, you know, I say it now, it's progressing well. It's a tough piece of work. It's an incredible piece of work that's been done under a really tight timescale by officers and councillors, and we welcome that and appreciate that, and let's leave that alone. It's got some good stuff. It's getting there. It's pretty much on time, I think, where we'd expect to be. So that I think we can worry about. So the other bits are noted there in the last column over the recommendations, and I would just ask anyone who wants to make some comments on those, or disagree with them strongly and want to have that noted, and maybe we change things. So we take it from there if we can. Any councillors, please? Any cabinet members? Like Pip and then Alex, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so just some general points. Well, given the fact that we are constrained by, officer, capacity to pick up more working groups, running concurrently. Concurrently. But I do like the imaginative suggestions that come, for example, like councillor briefings or workshops, one-offs, so that there may well be opportunities for some of these to benefit from the input of councillors, but not in a traditional working group format. And that's a way, I think, of getting on with the business, but without, within the resources that we've got available to us. So I'm pleased and I'm happy to support the whole package. Thank you.
Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I think you look through this and it is that case of there's always going to be a good case for what you prioritise and what you don't, and we are facing limited resources. Quite simply, it's not a case of money even, it's just literally a case of bodies in terms of council officers to support. There just aren't enough of you. and that's well documented over the years, where we're short of officers, and we would, in an ideal world, like a lot more. Not too many more, obviously, but certainly. Yeah, I don't want to give them too much. But yeah, I mean, I think from that perspective, I think you can look at the work of the older persons accommodation review wasn't finished in the last council. It's vital that is finished, and it would be a crime to leave that unfinished into this council as well to reprioritise. And the local plan, as we know, there are so many within this list that actually that local plan working group covers as well. So I think that there's a huge number of the issues within there. From my perspective, I suppose everything else under there is defer consideration. What can we do? What can we prioritise on the agenda? And tonight isn't the time to be setting that in stone. But the one that particularly I wanted to talk about, which is the impact of the rapid increase of short-term holiday lets on the community and council services. Now, the idea of a councillor workshop is actually, I think, quite a useful thing that we can explore as a council, something slightly different. What we've had before is we've had councillor briefings where we sit there and we get told what's going on. But we do have in this council, and it's a relatively new council, a huge amount of expertise and knowledge. And I think maybe some of the capacity that we could properly put councillors to work and maybe do a lot of the early yards before we get to the stage of having to formally create a working group. Now, this doesn't mean that there won't be a working group on this when resources and government legislation make it necessary, because there will have to be a lot of work, not least how the council deals with it. And we talked about council corporately earlier on, how that corporate structure deals with whatever comes from the government, whatever comes from the findings of the councillors as we look at. So what I would like to do is try and put a line in the sand and say that councillor workshop is convened as quickly as possible. I don't actually have a date in mind, but I think we should start looking at dates as soon as we finish tonight, reaching out to councillors that are interested, and to a certain extent, as far as councillors are concerned, the more the merrier, because if we're going to be doing it ourselves, then we'll need more people to spread the workload, and who knows what we'll come back with. But yeah, I think that's the best solution, given the fact that I don't think we can deprioritise the things that we can achieve at the moment, and I'm very keen to get working on that one. So I'll stop waffling on.
Okay, I think it was Chris and Mel, isn't it, who to speak? So I'll go for Mel first, and then you, Chris, if that's all right.
Okay, thank you. It was just on the climate change and biodiversity government one. I just wanted to make sure that they weren't together, because there's a little note in there that says we're waiting for the biodiversity motion before we set up a working group. But as we know, there already is a working group for the biodiversity in open spaces, so that's kind of covered. We kind of covered that. So just we could take that out, really, and just say that we are working towards this climate change governance working group, or whatever form it decides to take. And in the meantime, whilst we're waiting for it, that council workshop would be greatly appreciated, I think. Thank you. Oh, kind of one more point on the youth council. Yeah, obviously that is sad to read, that we just haven't got the funding there, and it is written in the because I remember pre-May I proposed that motion myself. So, but I just wonder what the scope was for perhaps even more some little workshops that weren't, with less resources, even just having some young people come here and do a sort of pretend political debate or something. I don't know how we could work that, but if there's any scope for that sort of stuff that didn't involve an actual working group at this stage. But,
Yeah, do you want to come back on it, Susie? Good, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, obviously the voice of the young person is really important to us all. Doing it with little resources challenging. So I think what we need to do is look at our existing consultation arrangements and how we can expand those to actually include the voice of the young person and children where that's appropriate. What I am proposing to do is a workshop briefing session with all councillors to explore what appetite there is for councillors doing, getting involved, and what does that look like for you as elected members. So that's the proposal. We'll do a briefing in the fairly near future, and we'll kick around the ideas that we've got for doing that with the resource that we've got. Okay.
It's totally amazing working with kids, isn't it? I love it. I must admit, it's just, they give you a really hard time. It's much harder than most councillors. Chris.
I'm just picking up the suggestion of the Herne Bay Seaside Board and perhaps kind of an offer to Paul as chair and ONS. This strikes me as at its heart, there is a good idea. However, the idea of a Whitstable Harbour Board as an example of how you should do it strikes me as not necessarily right. The Whitstable Harbour Board is established in part because of the Port Marine Safety Code, which says that we need to have a specific body. So what we're actually suggesting here is either we want a kind of very heavily focused local area decision-making body, like a kind of forums plus type of thing, or there's generally a kind of democratic deficit. Now, I appreciate that there was a Herne Bay development plan, which at one point was about spending money which we had out of Section 106 agreements, which have gone, and there may be an argument to regurgitate that. But I'm also cautious about just kicking it into a governance review. It strikes me we've really got to pick out what we need here properly, because there might be an argument, for example, to say town centre strategies, which we're implementing as part of a local plan, should have a delivery mechanism, for example. So I think I would just say, perhaps as a pushback to ONS, Paul, if you want to schedule a kind of maybe a councillor briefing where we can unpick this a little bit and perhaps better articulate what the issue is, that would A, be useful, because if we went into a community governance review, we'd have a scoping exercise, if you know what I mean. And B, there might be some short-term work which can be done. Rather, I don't think creating a working group for what the ask is the kind of best answer.
Okay. That seems like a good thing to get kicking about and seeing where it goes. And that's within our scope, really, isn't it, to be quite honest about it, I think. So, Charlotte, go ahead.
Picking up on what Chris has just said, what is being asked, it seems to me, in the notes here about a Herne Bay Seaside Board is very similar to questions we're asking ourselves within the Canterbury Tales of England group about the longevity of the projects for the city and how we bring groups together and what forum what that looks like, and is there a democratic deficit? If not, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to bring people together for expertise sake and to join up visions? So a lot of this we're trying to answer in Canterbury Tales of England right at the moment. It seems to me as well, if that's something ONS wants to discuss, I'd be very keen to contribute to that discussion and work out in the longer term how Canterbury Tales of England, CETO, a horrible acronym, could help model future versions for the coast. But the Whitstable Harbour Board, it isn't. Perhaps CETO it more is. But that might be a coastal board rather than a Herne Bay specific one. And we're talking in the medium to long term here, because the Canterbury Tales of England coming out of the Lough is just beginning to work out what it is. And we will bring that through probably ONS or governance at some point soon as well. On the short-term holiday lets strategy, we can't delay too long, and I absolutely concur with Alex. Let's bring this workshop forward as soon as possible, make sure we're preempting and are ready for the legislation and are doing some scope exercises, we as Cabinet, and Cabinet take the lead here. I'm not entirely sure after the workshop we do need a working group at all on this, and I think a good workshop followed by some hard work from Cabinet actually delivers perhaps much quicker results, and or we may not be in a position to wait. So I'd really like to see Cabinet take the lead on this one, and not necessarily. And I know we're pausing on the working group, but I will put a sort of finger in the water there and just say I think we should be using it. We have 2 extra members of Cabinet. We have a dynamic, strong, very hard-working Cabinet. and we may not need officer resource on this one beyond the workshop at this point.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, Charlotte. That's fine. Just come back very quickly on that. Also, I think it would be a good exercise for everyone, all councillors and all cabinet especially, to understand the implications of what's in the levelling up levelling up bill now, the opportunities, business rates, all that sort of stuff. We need to have a really good briefing so we can really get our head around all of those facts and figures. And that's an opportunity to do just that, isn't it? And kick that conversation off, and let's get the hard work done. Yeah, go ahead, Chris. Thanks.
I was just going to say, to declare I own a holiday let, so I'm going to abstain for the vote.
I do too, so it's something that we're out of it. But
My husband owns one.
yes. I think actually, to be truthful, at this moment in time, scoping wise, I think it's probably a positive thing, to be honest. So.
Can we confirm which one we're voting on? Because there are 3 options, I think, weren't there?
So, what one would you like? No, seriously. Okay. Did you second this, Pep? Sorry, we didn't have a note.
Has it been proposed, Chair? Who's going to propose it?
Oh, okay. Beg your pardon. That's my mistake then. Okay, let's go for this then. So, okay. This is the...
I'm happy to propose option
Yeah, thank
1
you,
if
but-
somebody wants a proposer.
Honestly, I think it's better that somebody from one of the other cabinet proposes it, and Pip's obviously happy to propose or second, whichever. So would one of the other...
Yes, I'm happy to propose, accept the recommendations put forward in the appendix to the report. Acceptance of these recommendations will enable officers to focus on the immediate priorities and ensure deadlines are met. I propose option 1. Thank you.
Thank you. That's exactly what we need, isn't it? Okay.
That's carried, Chair, with 6 votes.
Thank you. We're going to change direction now to bins. If anyone wants a quick 2-minute break, I could do just a 2-minute break. That'll be really good. Okay, so is that okay, everyone? So that's fine. Well, thanks for that. So we're back now. Agenda item 9. This is a review of the garden waste to consider the report and Director of Corporate Services and the Head of Paid Services. Sarah Randall, the Contract Manager. Cabinet Member Charlotte Cornell is Cabinet Member for Heritage, Open Space and Waste and Recycling, and is responsible for this and will be explaining the report to us all to help us understand. So I will leave this with you to start, then Charlotte, and if you at the end of your introduction or before it, whichever you wish to do, to read out the proposal and seek a seconder, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I know you'll all understand very quickly because you've all read the papers, but the ONS Overview and Scrutiny Committee had some very interesting debate, which we, Councillor Baldock and I listened to with great interest and have reflected in the minutes from that committee. In short, we would like to agree the following changes to the garden waste subscription service from 2024. Number 1, we will not provide stickers. Number 2, to move from direct debit payments to online card payments. Number 3, to consult on the proposal to no longer provide a free Christmas tree collection from February 25 as part of the budget consultation. Number 4, we wish to move to a 46-week service, but only if the free Christmas tree collection is dropped. Number 5, we wish to exclude purple sack properties from the garden waste scheme. And number 6, undertake a thorough comms plan to promote all our changes, to make sure residents are thoroughly informed and that we don't miss opportunities through lack of communication and engagement. Thank you. And I propose, I propose this and would seek a seconder.
So that's proposed by Councillor Charlotte Cornell and seconded by Councillor Connie Nolan. Okay, over to you, Charlotte, to introduce the report and say any comments you want to do, and just go for questions and answers.
No, it is a very thorough report. Stickers are, as you can see, very expensive to mail out. They don't necessarily weather the test of time particularly well, and as such don't provide a cost-effective demarcation of subscribers' residences. There are other ways to do this using our online systems and by encouraging subscribers to label their bins clearly. And I think with a very clearly labelled bin placed in the correct place, our systems can identify, yes, this bin is on our system to be collected. So that's part when we talk about the thorough communication strategy to residents, we really do need people to put their house number, make sure their house number is demarked on their bin or their name of their house. That is immensely useful to us as a collecting agency. Moving from direct debit payments to online card payments, too many direct debits fail. It is costly for us to chase up failed payments. Often people change and amend their direct debits just before they're due to be taken. So whilst Overview and Scrutiny wondered if you upload your card, it only lasts for a year and then you have to renew. Doesn't have the security perhaps of an ongoing direct debit. We actually do feel that our revenue will be greater and the reliability of our revenue will be greater for changing to card payments. And it's not just credit card payments, it's debit cards as well. It's all kinds of card payments. And for those who don't have credit or debit cards available, we will still be able to accept other forms of payment in those rare circumstances on an individual case-by-case basis. So absolutely doesn't exclude those who might wish to pay by potentially cash or cheque. And we're not killing cash in this council. Number 3, the free Christmas tree collection to be stopped in February 2025 is to be consulted on. So that it's not a firm decision. We absolutely want to listen to the public, and everyone knows in the press every year you have those stories, how green is your tree? You know, we are declaring a biodiversity and climate change emergency, and we need to reflect in our practice climate and biodiversity best choices. We would, of course, encourage people, if they do choose to continue to have a real tree, and we do, I will declare my interest as a real tree, Christmas tree owner. I can't be persuaded otherwise. That there are plenty of, there are a few very good charities locally that collect and chip your tree, and it's an ideal opportunity for many households that do still choose to have a tree to continue the sort of festive period of giving by looking at other opportunities for the disposal of the tree. We will, however, we do intend, however, to collect the tree from anyone who has a garden waste subscription. No, that doesn't involve dumping your tree in the bin. It probably means leaving your tree alongside the bin. The risk, of course, is that there are areas of fly tipping and people leave their trees anyway in areas that they traditionally have always left their tree in big piles in the middle of Whitstable. And, you know, Chris doesn't have to be the hero that he's been in a couple of years of, you know, commandeering a truck and going around and collecting them personally. But again, this is a communications strategy issue. If we are very clear to households that disposing of your tree in a public space is now fly tipping and unacceptable, and that there are other community and charity friendly options for people to take, I think the message would be clear to the public that you have the chance to make a decent community minded choice here. And we can rely, I'm sure, on the good people of the district to spread that word. As we, yes, our budgets are tight. Yes, we're looking to do the right thing environmentally, but also that there is an opportunity for excellent charities such as Pilgrim's Hospice, who've provided a tree collection and chipping service. So I think there can be multiple winners as we look to refine our service. Excluding purple sack properties from the garden waste scheme, again, the detail is in the report. There aren't that many properties, purple sack properties on the garden waste scheme, because of course purple sack properties are where there is no room for a bin, so often, very often, not much room for a garden. And there, in the report, it does detail some of the considerations we'd make for people if they did have gardens and wish to retain a green bin, where those could be placed. And the comms plan, I think in my introduction, I've highlighted how important that will be to the effective implementation of points 1 to 5 that I have already discussed. So I open that up for discussion and questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. That's really important. I think just one tiny comment during the really good overview and scrutiny debate that we had, and it was very, very helpful, wasn't it? I think as we went round, one thing that did come out, we did need that clarity, because we were very, and I know Paul was chair, was, you know, brilliant on that, taking that through. We were very uncomfortable, I think, as a group of people about the payment methods. You know, it didn't make sense, to be honest. It needed explaining, and obviously if anyone here is a little bit unclear of why, what intuitively sounds like a great idea of a direct debit is actually not such a great idea in practice. And that was a useful point to go over, and was well helpful then, but still didn't quite convince the overview and scrutiny team. And that's what they're there for, to give it a good looking at, and we appreciate that.
That's absolutely right. And I will thank the officers who I've come back to on that point a couple of times just for greater clarity. After listening to the debate, it was really helpful to go and ask people those drilled down questions. There was overview and scrutiny, a 10-minute debate about whether it was only credit cards, despite it clearly saying in the report debit and credit. So I couldn't, raise that at the point because we can't contribute to meeting. But it's not just a credit card facility. We're not encouraging people to only use credit, and cash is still available.
Thanks, Charlotte. It's Pip first, please. If you can come. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I generally support all of it, except I have made a note for myself, not having been at ONS. It says it's about the direct debit. So it's just a quick question, I hope. If that's monthly currently and it's going to go to annual, I've got a problem. If it's annual to annual, then I understand all of the arguments. And so long as I'm reassured that it's like for like in terms of frequency of payments, then I haven't got a problem. I can see officers nodding, so I'll feel reassured about that. And then if I could just ask, I don't know whether Sarah is able to it says currently a few purple sacks have managed to subscribe to the garden waste service. I wondered if you had a rough idea as to number, because I think I do have some people living in Westgate Ward who are on purple sacks and also subscribe to garden waste because they bring their green waste bin through their house because that's important to them. Thank you.
Thanks, Pip. Do you want to take that, Sarah, before you? Yeah, okay, we'll go through that. And
Before I
then
forget.
speak Alex after that.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I wouldn't like to quote how many. It isn't that many. There's only just over 2,000 actually purple sack users. That there is a small number. What we will be encouraging them to do is move over from purple sack to normal bins. So if they move their garden bin through their house, then there's really no reason they shouldn't be doing their other bins to provide that service, and it will save the council money from not having, and also the litter that's associated with purple sacks, particularly on the coast and the seagulls. So the more people we can encourage over into our standard waste collection service, i.e. bins, the better, and recycling. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. If I could just supplementary, if it's possible outside of this meeting to get a rough idea of the numbers, because when it goes out to consultation, I'm just trying to gauge how loud the howls of, kind of concern will be, understandably from a number of people. And I just want to, have an idea of whether we're talking about dozens or many hundreds. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah.
Go ahead, Alex, and then Chris.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the report. I also didn't manage to go to Overview and Scrutiny Committee because I've got to try and pick and choose the committees I attend where I can. And since I wasn't compelled, I thought I wouldn't. I think there's a couple of things in here and they're largely answered by what's clearly the work been done after Overview and Scrutiny and the questions that have been asked. I think that's good. A lot of them come down to the comms challenge, and I think around the Christmas tree collections, it's an area that there's always going to be issues because, as the report mentions, I've certainly seen people going, there are still Christmas trees in my road, and Christmas trees have been left out for a really long time. And at what point does that become a Christmas tree that hasn't been collected, and somebody just leaving some garden waste out? And I can really foresee some of those issues around fly tipping and people just doing what they've always done. It's always going to be something that happens. So we've got to get the comms right on that and make sure that people know there are alternative options. But I think, green bin holders will welcome the fact that they'll still be able to do that as they would and consider it, even though it may technically be household waste, garden waste. I'm also concerned about the payment methods, and I think to your point, Pip, from my perspective as a user of the service, it won't make a huge amount of difference because I almost always have to rush to pay for my green bin collection immediately as I filled the green bin and realised I don't actually have the sticker, so I have to leave the bin full for a couple of weeks until I get around to paying it. So actually it doesn't make a huge difference to me. However, I do spend a fair bit of time helping residents with green bin applications, and it's particularly elderly residents who struggle with online payments and that kind of thing. Communication's hugely important around that. I think even if it is by exception, the ability to pay by cash and by cheque, because there are simply some people who only have those options available. And I think speaking with a ward councillor hat on now, it would be really, really useful. I think ward councillors are hugely helpful in this, is if you can tell us in detail what it is that's open to residents, how we can help people through that, because I know that's something that I end up dealing with quite a lot, and just helping people through that process and filling in forms, whatever way around it is. But yeah, I think, it makes a lot of sense. I do understand the, having been on the other side of dealing with direct debits, I do understand that they are a massive faff to do when you're the one taking the money rather than the one giving the money. And I think, anything we can do. And one thing I will say through this process is let's keep an eye on how that affects uptake of green bins, what that means. I think the sticker thing, is a really good idea as well, because the number of times you just tell people, doesn't matter if you haven't got your sticker, they'll collect it anyway. And the next thing the resident says is, well, what's the point of sending a sticker out if I don't need it? There you go, question answered. And I think as long as that's communicated well, people will really understand that. You don't need it. They'll know where your bin is. They collect your other bins and they know where you are anyway. I think that's good. But I think let's have a look through this process, what the effect on the uptake of the scheme is across the district. I know that when the charge was introduced, I wasn't a fan of the charge being introduced. We had an idea of what the uptake was going to be. I think that let's look at what the sort of price flexibility is with green bins, what's going on here. If ease of accessing the service drops a load of people out, is that going to be a false economy? I think we really need to be careful, but use this as an opportunity to see what the green bin tolerance is, if there's an opportunity to expand the scheme, get more people using it, expand it across the district, if it's something that's going to be affected by changes very quickly, how sensitive people are to these changes. I think let's keep a really close eye on it and see what's going on and try and inform, as we've done here, a more sensible and detailed policy going forward so that we can look at this when it comes up next time. But I think a really strong paper, really strong debate, and I'm minded to support it. Thank you.
Okay, I think it was Chris and then Mike, if we can, please.
Happy to support all the recommendations. Just a few points. First of which, I think getting rid of stickers is relatively sensible, but it strikes me that they are a reminder for new residents moving into the area that a green waste bin collection system exists. So I think we want to, or I'd be interested in a way in which people, when they automatically register for their council tax, can also be reminded what our waste collection streams are and automatically receive an email on that. Or we just have clearer information on the website. With regarding kind of Christmas and how we deal with fly tipping enforcement, I think it's going to be interesting. But I think the more we can encourage people about the range of different things they can do with their Christmas trees, where they can seek to remove them. Well, I mean, you know, whether you can, because people always ask, can I chip them and put them in my garden? And some people say, yes, you can put them on compost. And some people say, no, you can't, don't they? But there are always things like, isn't there like a local dogs trust that takes them for dogs somewhere and they chip them in the RNLI as well as the Pilgrims Hospice in town. So there's many different places. I'd also be interested in whether it's worth putting some proactive signage in places we know we already collect large piles of Christmas trees in heavy urban areas. The places historically we've collected them, perhaps we could proactively in the December saying, we're not going to collect them this time. This is where we're going. Just a point on moving from 42 to 46 weeks. I assume that because this is dependent on a consultation in the budget, which we'll agree in February, it wouldn't be something which was introduced in January, February, March next year. It would be for 25. Fine, because I just think we also need to clarify, I'm aware with the service that we've offered coming out of the GMB dispute for an extra year's worth of, month. It's worth of free service. That might be a complicated, I'll be clear, it's an extra month for the record. That will be a relatively complicated comms exercise if we were going to be missing around with it in 25. And then just picking up on Pip's issue, I think the clearer we can have an idea about how many purple sacks and where they're affected, because I think that this will provide an opportunity to look at where we can reduce the number of purple sacks. But I'm also aware that local residents are very split on it. And if you found 6 people in a row, 4 of which are green bins, and you thought you could move all 6 of them across, 2 of them will cause merry hell. So if essentially we could identify the physical locations and maybe have some conversations with ward councillors proactively, rather than just try and push everybody off them, I think that would be really positive, because I do agree. I think our ambition should be to reduce the number of purple sack collections, you know, substantively. Most of them are probably in Pip's ward or mine. There's quite a few in Heron as well. But I think we just need a process for that. It strikes me that saying that because they pay for it, we can shift them, doesn't reflect that there are people around them who might not think that that's the case. Thank you.
Let's just let Mike and then Tricia be good.
Thank you, Alan. I'm glad we're talking about this early, I'm quite happy with the recommendation, but people do need time to think about this and change their habits. And on the Christmas trees, if I recall correctly, I think last time Pilgrim's Hospice quickly got up to capacity and couldn't take any more. So if we're going to ask those in the charitable sector, and there may be other charities that want to get involved in this, they need time to gear up for that, and we need time to let residents know about it as well. I wonder, have we considered at all whether there is any scope in charging just for collections of Christmas tree like we do for bulk collections of household goods? It may be that it's just not worth charging a £5 or something to do it, but if people are willing to pay a donation to a charity and the charity doesn't have capacity, it may be they're quite happy to pay £5 to the council to take a Christmas tree away, and it could actually be, at least cost neutral, if not a money earner for us. And on that as well, I wondered if we've got any ideas of numbers as to how many Christmas trees we normally collect, and compared to how many garden waste subscribers we have, so that if we are going to go out to other organisations, they can know, actually, you might expect to pick up 10,000 Christmas trees if you want to gear up for this. So it's going out there now to the community so that we can both serve our residents and hopefully raise a bit of money for other charities as well.
Just let Tricia come back and then Connie, is that okay? Yeah, go on then, Connie. Okay. Thanks.
I listened online to the ONS, and there was a great discussion, not just about the debit and credit cards, but also about the stickers. And I actually think that, as other people have said, we need a really good communications strategy on this. And I think it's worth putting everything in there. The good bits, possibility of increasing as well as the bad bits. But what I want to say is I'm very concerned that we don't increase the propensity for fly tipping, because one thing that I do remember from my youth is that when you throw a match on a Christmas tree, it does go up like a Christmas tree. So I do think that is a problem that we really should be thinking about, that it's not only fly tipping, but it could also be a fire risk as well. So I think Mike's point about giving clear guidance to charities that they will be having more, potentially more customers is an excellent one, because I certainly don't want sort of fires in sort of various places around the district. Thank you.
Tricia?
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of points to pick up. One on the Christmas trees. I suppose there's three things on that. One, you're making a decision to go out to consult on that at the moment, and then you can look at the feedback from the consultation and make a final decision based on the consultation. Secondly, and I think you've picked it up, but it's just a reminder that it would apply not for this Christmas, but for the Christmas after. So we do have some time to do some planning and pick up some of the points that you've made about talking to the charities who are doing the collections, seeing if there's anything we might want to do ourselves and so on. And thirdly, on Christmas trees, if someone has got a garden waste subscription, they will continue to have their Christmas tree collected if that's what they want to do. So for those residents, they will still have that collection. It will be discontinuing it for residents who aren't subscribing to the garden waste collection service. So that takes 18,000?
26,000.
26,000 properties out of who will still have that opportunity. So that's that one. I was just going to talk about the direct debit thing, because that was discussed a lot at overview and scrutiny. And I think when we introduced the garden waste charging and we introduced direct debit payments, we thought this was, and it's a great, normally from a financial point of view, it's what I would want us to be doing as a council. The transaction charges are much lower. People don't have to do annual renewals. They just roll on from year to year. And that seems like the best way to do it. And I think we thought we'd stolen a march on a lot of our neighbouring authorities who don't do that, but actually do payments by debit and credit card. I think we've learned a lesson from that actually, whilst direct debit works really well for something like council tax, where it's collecting a tax and that's the end of the transaction, where you have this then feeds into an operational system and direct debits bounce back, and then you have to go all the way through the system and reverse it and so on. It's become really labour intensive, and that's why we're proposing to move away to debit and credit cards. So I can see why people are saying, well, why on earth would you want to do that? Because I would normally say direct debit is exactly the route you want to go down, but actually we're finding it very cumbersome operationally, and that's why we're going down the route of debit and credit card payments, which is what our neighbouring authorities are all doing. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just raise a couple of things? One, there was a quick mention of chargeback, and I think we feel that that's still within our grasp to get hold of that, isn't it? Should somebody decide that their bin's not being collected and therefore they're going to dock us a tenner or something just to teach us a lesson. That was one thing. I think the other thing is almost to state the obvious, really, but I presume if somebody's on purple sacks now and they give their hand on heart guarantee they're going to come to a bin, they get a free bin. Yeah. And do they have to have a massive great bin? Can they have what I used to call the granny size bins? They still do them. So I'm just thinking of wheeling through houses. Yeah?
There is two sizes, yes.
Yeah, that's too big and much too big.
No, there is a small one as well.
Okay. No, that's okay. It's just an option, isn't it, for households, because it goes through the door, you know. That's fine. Just come back on those two bits and then that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think Sarah's covered the bin, and so there is like a compact slimline bin, whatever you might call it. Can't think of the right term, but a smaller size bin. So that hopefully helps with that one. On chargeback, I mean, actually, if someone, before the strike, if we had failed to deliver their service for garden waste, we would, where that was justified, consider a refund of one payment anyway. So we would expect people to go through that route and come back to the council rather than go to a chargeback, because with a chargeback system, you are expected to have tried to resolve the issue with the supplier in the first place.
Do we need to change clause 22 to reflect that? On that terms and conditions, the one that goes on about we don't have to collect your bin, that one. No, that's fine. But do we need to change the wording of that?
I think we look at all.
Yeah, I think we ought to, don't you? Yeah. Does Charlotte want to come in on that, because we've had lots of discussions over terms and conditions, haven't we?
We have. I think we'll definitely look to make sure that stands up to both the consultation and the proposals. I think that's worth bearing in mind. We have looked at it a lot recently. I think we will look at it again with this in mind. I was just going to ask, and I know I'm asking a question of my own report. When we go to consult, are we consulting on green waste subscribers getting one Christmas tree collected? What about, I mean, I just noticed that looking at the list of mayors, there's probably some people with very large palatial properties that have 25 trees, or in the spirit of festivities, wish to also get their neighbour's tree collected on their subscription. So are we consulting on one tree collected per subscription?
To be fair, I don't think we've actually said it's a limit of a certain number. If it's palatial, normally they have palatial gardens and probably at least 6 subscriptions, in which case they should be allowed at least 6 trees. Christmas trees.
One tree per bin.
Yes, one per subscription.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. So, was any other comments on that before we go to a vote? Okay, thank you.
That's carried, Chair.
We're still on bins, so we're still in that part of the meeting, and this time it's we need to talk a little bit about I've lost place. Beg your pardon. Here we go. Item 10, isn't it? Clinical waste services. That's pages 45 to 57, please. I think that's right. Yeah, that's great. Okay. So, again, it is really looking at 45%. It's much further on that, isn't it? Hang on, there we go. Just find a bit. Yeah, online it's page 58, item 10. Not that at all. Let's start again, shall we? Item page 58. To consider the report, Director of Corporate Services and Head of Paid Services, sort of review of clinical waste. Sarah Randall is our officer for this one as well, and I'll get Charlotte to introduce the report and to make a proposal, or to propose it, and to obviously one of you to be a second. So if I could leave that bit now to you, Charlotte, to move this one forward. So it's introducing the report, the proposals, and seeking a second, please.
Thank you very much. I will introduce the report and then make my proposal. I did it the other way around at the previous item, and this makes more logistical sense. So we collect clinical waste and sharps boxes free of charge from residents across the district, but the service is delivered by just one vehicle and one operative 5 days a week, and or at least 2 days a week, the demand for the service is too great. We cannot, without great expense, provide this level of ongoing service. The cost of an additional operative vehicle and fuel is estimated at £52,000 a year. But there are greater efficiencies we can make in the service, and hence the proposals today. So the service provided across the district involves residents registering for either a sharps box and or a clinical sack collection. And a sample week includes over 800 jobs on Bartek for clinical sack collections. And there are about 70 to 80 box collections a week and a large number of deliveries of sharps boxes. And this can fluctuate greatly. So we have people that are on long-term sharps collections, but also there are a lot of people who go in for operations where they might only need a week or two of sharps collection. And so it is a really flexible service. There, of course, if you go in for many operations requiring a general anaesthetic, you may require a short-term sharps disposal facility. A lot of people know, of course, to reach out to the council so that you dispose of your sharps safely and correctly. Not all people do that. We want to provide a service which encourages people to dispose of sharps correctly and make sure that our comms around that is efficient. So Civica is also experiencing a large volume of emails and some calls which could be reduced if changes to the service are made. We are currently talking to KCC about changing some customers from sacks, and we would provide them with larger bins. So where some customers were on clinical sacks and only had a 180 litre bin, and we might provide them with 340 litre residual bins. This is where the waste doesn't meet the legal definition to require a clinical waste subscription service. So, for example, some incontinence wear is often disposed of in clinical waste sacks. This doesn't meet the threshold for legal clinical waste disposal and could be disposed of in residual bins. And that actually makes up a significant proportion of what is put in clinical waste. By changing where the waste goes, we can make greater efficiencies and not require perhaps that additional operative and vehicle to come on site. So a number of actions are required. We'd like to review all clinical sack users using a survey. People's needs change greatly, and often the people that use this service are in a very pressing and vulnerable period of their life. We are not the service they often think of ringing first to update their circumstances. And I think we are very happy to be proactive and reach out to these people and see, are their needs being met? Are we up to date in understanding what those needs are? Can we make some changes for them, such as the larger residual bin, remove them altogether, or keep on clinical waste? So we will make that judgment and feed that back into our systems. We want to review the acceptance criteria for SAC users. So SACs should only be provided for those where their clinical waste meets the legal requirements set out by legislation. And we propose that we need a letter from a health professional to continue to provide clinical waste collections. This was really interesting to hear the debate at ONS about this. Of course, some GP services might charge for this letter. GP services are very stretched. I'd love to hear Cabinet's reflections on this particular point, but we do need to know that our residents who do need that service, and often residents aren't able to tell us, does their waste meet the legal criteria? And we often won't be able to get that information from the resident. So the GP or a health professional, this might be a health visitor, it might be some visiting other qualified professional, but we might have flexibility in who provided that letter. But do they meet the legal definition to continue with SAC use? Increase the size of sharps boxes. We wish to move from 5 litre to 10 litre boxes. Although the cost of a box is slightly more, the resident will need fewer boxes and so fewer collections every year. This will reduce our carbon footprint and also reduce the pressure on our rounds. Service requests for sharps boxes. We need to make sure that our digital team are up to date and we're putting into place a proper digital form for said requests. And the 5th point is a service request for SACs. For those who remain on the SAC scheme, we would like SACs to be provided routinely rather than the resident have to get back in touch to request more SACs. Again, that's taking pressures off residents who already have a lot of pressures on them during periods of long-term ill health. So the benefits of the changes include more balanced and achievable rounds, a reduced volume of clinical waste, so reducing or hopefully eliminating the need for a second round with vehicle and operative and the costs that ensue. Updated information on all our customers and a better understanding of their needs and personal circumstances. And for those who remain on the scheme, a better, more reliable service where they have to reach out less often to us and can focus on getting well and putting the energies into their health. So I come back and the proposal is thus. Number 1, to review all current SAC users using the survey information. Number 2, to amend the acceptance criteria for SAC users. Number 3, to increase the size of sharps boxes. Number 4, when resources in digital allow, we wish to create a new digital form for requesting new sharps boxes and collections. And number 5, when said review is completed and the numbers on the SAC service is reduced, agenda item 10, page 58, to deliver new SACs on a routine basis. Thank you, and I'll seek a seconder for my proposal.
Thank you, and that's seconded by Councillor Chris Cornell. Thank you for that. That's good. Mike, please.
As you suggested, Charlotte, I do have some issues with the item you mentioned. You know, the difficulty in getting a letter from a health professional, but also the fact that we're prying a bit into people's individual health circumstances, and and unless we word this very carefully, giving them the impression that we're no longer going to collect their waste and we're not treating them with the same dignity that we were before. And I often think it must be quite difficult sometimes if you have clinical waste and everyone can see those yellow bags outside your house. It does, send a signal, and people think, well, whatever they may think about that. So the idea of having bins, I think, is a good idea. And if we can encourage people to put the correct things in with their normal waste, then that's great. And if that can reduce numbers of clinical collections down, great. But I wonder if we can just do we have to go the whole hog on this? Can we write to people on the clinical waste scheme and say, did you know that if you only have X, Y, and Z, you can put it in your black bin and you don't therefore need to have a clinical waste collection service? And would that be enough? You know, if that reduced our collections by 10%, would that be enough to, without going the whole hog on this? So I'd just like to, you know, investigate things like that first, rather than alarm people that we may not, you know, be collecting their clinical waste, or that we are demanding to know exactly what their medical issues are and putting pressure on them to get a certificate saying something.
Yes, Sarah, you can come back on that one.
Yes. Unfortunately, it is something that we used to do. With COVID, we actually lapsed the scheme in order to continue the service and add people into the service. We have a legal requirement to know what waste we're carrying and why we're carrying it as clinical. And at the moment, we can't do that. So actually, we do need to find out what waste they are putting in their yellow sacks and why they're putting it in the yellow sacks, so that we can then tell the disposal at Rochester what is being delivered to them in those yellow sacks. So unfortunately, there is a legal requirement that we do need to start getting that information and making sure we have it. I think you're right. I think we can word the letters and the communication really carefully, and we can be categorise some of the waste, but we also need to make it so that the resident understands it. So we can't get too technical. We need to give them some examples of what we're talking about, so that there is some work that we need to do about the wording of that letter and the information we require.
Okay, Chris, come back.
Just picking up the point as to who we might accept authoritative letters from, I wonder if it's worth, as part of a survey, trying to get a grasp of who people are in contact with, particularly if you're new to an area or you've been relocated near a family and your GP is some distance away. I think the recommendation about NHS-based floating support workers, or maybe even commissioned floating support workers from KCC and other exercises. I think if you can give them as much of a variety of places where you can receive the authority from, a little bit of flexibility in that might go a long way.
Can I just raise a couple of points? Yeah, okay. I think picking on Chris's point, and then what as well, they must pick their prescription up from a pharmacy, which would include sharps, probably some incontinence, materials and stuff as well, wouldn't they? So maybe a pharmacy, a qualified pharmacist would be a suitable, stopgap as well. Can't see, it's a professional, but they may not think of that in the same way, perhaps. They're still a health professional, aren't they? In every sense of the word. So maybe that might be an option we can think about, maybe highlighting, and maybe write or talk to a few local pharmacists to see whether that would be a bridge too far, or whether that's something I might consider as good. I think one thing with all of collections, because we're struggling with collections, you have to be really careful how you transition. So I think we wouldn't want to put in 1 week all of the 10 or the large sharps boxes out, because exactly the same distance away in 3 months' time, you'd have exactly the same number to collect. So we need to stagger things like that. And I think that would go with lots of the other materials as well, if we're changing anything. So because we've got such a limited collection resource. Yeah, and the survey focus, I think, is so important. I think we talked about it quite a lot, and it's really helpful to have that conversation at Opium Scrutiny was that as well, and really, really important about that. And just suggesting solutions to people will probably be okay, and making it really simple. So that's good. Thank you for that. Go ahead, Mel and Pip. But if you want to come back, Sarah, first, that'd be fine.
Thanks. Yeah, the standard ones, Dover, for example, say that it has to be a district nurse, health visitor or doctor. What I'm keen to do is actually to look at the other districts across Kent and see what else they come up with and what they've looked at. And yeah, we can come up with a list of people that they could use. So we'll go from there. And yeah, the survey needs to be sensitively written, and then staggering, definitely. We don't want to do all the changes on day one. We definitely don't want to deliver 340 litre bins to everyone on the same day. So it will be a staged process.
It was Mel and Pip. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had a question on the picking up the sacks. When when you're doing the review and people need to explain what their legal requirements are, how often you're intending to be asking for that information? Is that yearly or every 2 years? And then I kind of echoing what Councillor Sol was saying there. It is a very delicate area, I guess, and we've got to make sure that we make sure the Discrimination Act and Equalities Act comes into play when we're doing any of these kind of surveys, and that people's there's a lot, their discretion is there, I guess. Yeah.
I think part of that survey of our Kent councils will be useful to see if they do it annually or every 2 years. We review the assisted collections every 2 years, so I'd be more minded to do it every 2 years because that ties in nicely.
Yeah, just because from some people that I know who are living with disability or whatever, they have a lot of things that come round that they've got to do a form for, and they've just done that form, and then another one comes in to prove that they actually need the survey, and it can be very, very distressing, and make life very difficult. And so I wouldn't want it to be, I know it might be just a little form, but it could be something that's makes their life quite hard, more hard than it needs to be.
Go ahead, Mike. Sorry, and was it?
Can I?
Did I miss out? Sorry.
What, have I jumped in?
I don't know. Yeah, I did. Pip, wasn't it? Yeah, you can fight later or carry on, Pip. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So really, my questions have been answered about the frequency of the reconfirming, and so it would be good to know what other authorities are doing. And because I'm concerned, about adding to the workload of health professionals, I'm mindful of our needs as an authority, but also what Mel said about the additional stress to people, because it may just be a form, but actually there's an awful lot that underlies all of that, and I'd like to see if there's a way of managing this, of managing it differently. Really, I am quite concerned about this one. I don't know what I think at the moment. Thank you.
Come back, Mike. I've got a sort of a possible idea, I think.
It was just one other thought I had, and it was over the bin sizes and just a bit more flexibility there, because many of these users won't be in the best of health, or their families won't be. They may be elderly, and although they could perhaps go for assisted bin collection, they probably don't want to be dragging a 340 litre bin full of waste. So as long as there's a flexibility there that they could perhaps have an additional smaller bin, so have 2 small bins rather than one large bin. Otherwise, we might be giving them another problem.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I've kind of, I think that's the sort of thing I was going to suggest. Actually, I think one thing I'm sort of picking up here is that we're looking and saying that this is the way we should be working. We have to look at every nut. We've just done that really well in the garden waste bit, haven't we? This is another one of being forensic and looking at every option that we do. And there's no reason why we shouldn't do that. Unfortunately, it's the tough life we live in. But I think this is coming to the point. I'm thinking to myself, above all else, we need to get a grip on who's using what and what's happening. And I'm thinking that this is almost a point of allowing Sarah to go away for a couple of months and get this report and these surveys done, and then we come back again to Cabinet with the final proposals that we look at, rather than allow that to evolve from this, just to make sure we're really happy that we're covering off the way that we work with our residents. It doesn't really slow things up particularly. I think it's just a case of having a look. And, you know, if we need to have a special meeting, then we will do. You know, as my view is that we meet one afternoon or evening and spend an hour or two going over it if that's going to, you know, delay it unnecessarily. I don't know whether others feel that this is a time for actually learning from what we need to find out. 'Cause I think it's just got a little bit ramshackle, doesn't it, over the years, and it needs putting into line. Any thoughts on that, anyone?
Sorry, can I come back on the bin sizes? We did look at 2 180s, but the trouble is there's a more likelihood that they'll put just this type of waste in one bin and the general waste in the other. And we can't have that. It's got to be mixed, because interestingly, my understanding is I think it's the Environment Agency has picked up another authority that have done exactly that on the doorstep. So we can't have the resident using one bin for one and one for another unless we take it as clinical waste. So it has to be mixed. So yeah, we did look at it. That's why we haven't proposed that. That's why we're proposing the 340. So.
Can I ask a question on that, Sarah? Why would it be clinical waste if it's not legally clinical waste?
Unfortunately, there's a level that you can put nappies or anything like that in a bin, and this authority has been picked up on it. I don't know how or why or where the authority is, but I know that there is one that is being investigated because they brought in 2 180s to collect the waste.
So that needs to sort of work its way through again while this survey's going on, isn't it, in that report? So, yeah, that's fine. Do you want to come back on the point of splitting up and coming back again and have another bite at this after the survey? And any thoughts, Charlotte? It's your report.
I wonder if it would prevent too much delay if we sort of voted through going out to a full review of all clinical waste users, as you're proposing, Alan, and then it were brought to Cabinet. Would that prevent too much of a delay, Sarah? I suppose, it's budgetary implications going forward, so I'd like to hear feedback.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that certainly Sarah can carry out that survey work, which is understanding each resident's individual needs. That's what that survey is about. And she can also do the work finding out what other authorities do. Doing that and then bringing it back might cause a slight delay, which might have a cost implication on a temporary basis while we've got this additional volume of waste that we are collecting. The other alternative I was thinking about, but perhaps it's a bit late in the day to consider that, is you could decide that for new customers, you bring in the new approach, whilst Sarah's carrying out the survey of the existing customers, and you bring that back. There's different options on how you could make sure that your concerns and your sensitivities are being addressed in a considered way, whilst not having too much of a delay to the process. One of the other options could be that you decide as a Cabinet that you delegate to the portfolio holder to consider what comes out of the surveys, and you might then decide, actually, no, I do want to bring this back formally to Cabinet for a decision, or actually, no, I'm satisfied that this can continue on this basis.
Go ahead, Pip.
Okay, am I being too optimistic in thinking that if, Sarah, you started doing the survey and you would find 10% of the current users don't need the service at all, and they immediately drop off, which means that the current capacity, you know, the one vehicle, 2 operatives, would then be able to manage the demand?
I think Because it is a demand-led service, we are only collecting from those that have sacks there. So they are putting sacks out because they have to phone and book a slot. So it's not that he's going to houses without any collection.
So it's not that somebody's putting their, cat food and empty cereal boxes in clinical waste sacks?
I don't believe so. I believe they are
Because
using
historically they had historical... I'm just wondering if you think there may be people who used to need the service still put other sorts of, residual waste in those.
To be honest, I don't think so.
You don't
Not
think
on
that's
this
the
one.
case? Okay.
No.
All right then. That was too optimistic.
Okay, Chris.
I was just going to suggest that we took Tricia's suggestion, so we changed number 2 to delegate the acceptance criteria for SAC users to the cabinet member. Then we can get on with the piece of work. We can find out what other local authorities are doing. We can benchmark what the solution is. But overridingly, Sarah's also saying we have a legal duty to work out what we're picking up. So essentially, until we really know that, what we're talking about here is perhaps who we accept that information for. We've had a whole variety of options, but the first thing I'd want to know is what other authorities, what do they accept? Do they accept pharmacies here? Do they accept them vice versa? As much for consistency, because, you might get people who are leaving a hospital being told to contact their local authority, and if they were on a different side of the road, they'd have different guidance about what they were. So there's a benefit in a consistency of approach because it allows the early medical service to refer. So I think we could proceed with this document, essentially allow us to collect that information, and then if members of Cabinet had concerns about the actual acceptance, about who can provide a letter or so, or the phasing of that, so to speak, because it doesn't strike me as having a massive cost implication in terms of who we actually accept. We could delegate that to the cabinet member and we could have an internal discussion about that once we've collated the results of the survey. Does that seem a sensible way of progressing?
Yeah, I think so. So really what we'd be asking, if Charlotte is happy with it, is that Charlotte will work with Sarah. When that survey's done and we've got the information and facts together, we'll have that conversation about this is the way it's looking. Either we progress as broadly as we've got on paper now, or we agree something different if we need to, and we may need to come back to Cabinet to get that approved, or may not. It depends on the outcome, I think, doesn't it, of whether it's radically different or not.
I'm very happy to have that delegated as the cabinet member with this portfolio, and work really well and efficiently with Sarah, and we're both very well aware of the sensitivities around some of the work that needs to be done, and we will keep that at the forefront of our work going ahead.
I think that would set all our minds at rest, and certainly happy with that, but I'll let Pip do, because I think we need Pip's experience on this one as well.
I'm just wondering, if we vote that through to delegate some decisions, this doesn't come to full council. This is a decision here.
Yeah, the decision as amended. So we would amend the decision to say that it would come to,
Okay.
delegating the authority for that. Yeah, go ahead, Tricia.
Yeah, no, just to confirm that, Chair, you're being asked to resolve these decisions here, so they're decisions for Cabinet to make here. You're not recommending through to Council for Council to make the decision.
But can I be clear? I'm just seeking delegate item 2. Thus, it allows us to make the decisions about the size of sharp boxes, which will have a budgetary implication, and we can go and plan based on that.
So it doesn't change that, does it really? And, so I think we just need to be really clear on that. So, okay. Lauren, do you want to just summarise how you understand it? Is it exactly as it is a paper now? Do we need to amend some wording on there?
We've amended the wording, Chair, for number 2, that authority is delegated to the Cabinet member for heritage, open space, waste and recycling to amend the acceptance criteria for SAC users.
Happy with that, Charlotte? How about
Yes,
you?
Chair. Yeah.
and you're okay with that, Sarah? Does it make sense to you to implement it? If we're all happy with that. And do you want to say something, Tricia?
Sorry, Chair,
Yeah, go
to
on.
keep jumping in. If something's delegated to someone, you can always decide that you want to take it back up to the... So if it's delegated to you and you're not happy and you feel you want to bring it formally back to Cabinet, you're able to do that, or to make the delegated decision that's...
Lovely. If it's very thorny and unclear, you'll see it all again.
That sounds like a really sensible idea. Okay. Oh, that's exactly, I think, where we should be. We shouldn't be, forcing decisions through without some democratic process to it. So we just need to vote then, don't we, to move that forward. So thank you for that.
Votes carried, Chair.
That's great. Okay, so just before we do close, I think I'd like to just emphasise that I think tonight has been a good example of where, we've actually opened up a few things to talk about, to look forensically through things, and to debate and move things forward. So really happy with tonight. I think we've made some decisions, some fairly big decisions, some uncomfortable decisions, and the support of the officers through getting to this point has been amazing. So thank you for that, all of you. Please thank your teams that do the work on our behalf, and that would be really appreciated. So thanks for that. So yeah, we're looking forward to the next meeting at 7 o'clock on Monday, the 6th of November. Unless, of course, Charlotte wants us to come in earlier, but she'll let us know for that at all. So any other urgent business to be dealt with in public? I've got none identified. I think that's correct, Lauren. Yeah.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you for that. Item 13 is exclusion of press and public. There's no items that I've been notified of here, so I think we can move forward. Okay. And item 14, any other urgent business which falls under the exempt provisions of the Local Government Act 1972 or the Freedom of Information Act 2000 or both? I've had none identified.
None notified, Chair.
Okay, with that, I'll close the meeting, and it is 21:28.